on the line, you can't fold and you can't bend. Y'all be playing it safe and I be going for the win. Remember back when they was doubting on the kid. Now they tuned in cause my game too legit.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake and the Doc back in the house talking injuries. Now, we've done a lot of videos here recently, you know, kind of the Doc step away from the injury side a little bit and have some more fun talking some football. But now, he ain't got a choice, right? We got some big names starting to pop up in the news that we need to pay attention to because there's a lot of people drafting here in the next couple weeks, and we need to know if we should draft these guys or avoid them altogether. So Ethan, sorry, buddy, we're going to talk some injuries today.
You know, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And Dr. Death has returned.
Yes.
The bad news will just continue to come from now until the end of the season.
So, like, all that momentum you were gaining with Headliner Nation and, like, how cool and everything, and, like, now you're just going to kill everybody's dreams.
I'm fairly certain that no one in Headliner Nation thought I was cool, except for me. So
I don't know how to respond to that. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about some injuries here. We're going to get right into it because we got a laundry list full of names, and the first one that's coming up is probably a notification that people got on their phones here recently, and it's about Dak Prescott. Now, we know Dak Prescott suffered a gruesome injury last year, but now all of a sudden, dude is just dealing with a couple different things, and the shoulder issues sound like it's something that could linger into the regular season.
it is. So obviously Dak had the ankle dislocation and fracture last year. He's still recovering from that. He has a lat strain in July. And so what that is basically one of the muscles in his shoulder has been overstretched. And so when he goes to throw, kind of important when you're a quarterback, he has pain. And so the reports are that he is progressing with that shoulder issue, but he will not play in any preseason games. So it's pretty unlikely we will see him in any preseason action. He does still have plenty of time to recover for week 1. And I do at this point expect him to play, but the ankle is not going to be 100%. We see just statistically, you're expecting pain and discomfort to last well over a year with those types of injuries. Potentially for the rest of his career, we might have, the ankle issues showing up on injury reports, and so with Dak, the lat strain, again, it's going to be irritated as he starts to, ramp up his throwing. He does have time to do that. So I'm not concerned. It shouldn't really affect how people view him. For fantasy, I still think that, even though there is risk associated with him, the reward is still there as well.
Now, right now, I mean, he's labeled as like a top 5 fantasy quarterback, and I'm pulling up his ADP here real quick. Right now, his ADP is in the 5th. Is that too early for you given these injuries, or no? Are you still okay in the 5th?
I think the upside is still there, even in the 5th. Hopefully with, these types of reports coming out, we might start to see that dip a little bit more. People will start to shy away from him, especially in leagues where maybe they're not as up to date on what they've got going on. They might look up, one article that says, Dak Prescott, this is going to linger into the season, and say, okay, well, he's off my draft board. And so that's where I think the biggest thing is just understanding, yes, this is probably going to affect him to start the year, but it shouldn't affect him to the point where he's missing games and not able to produce for fantasy.
And if he misses games or he misses, more time here this offseason, and that price starts to dip, what do you do, Ethan? You buy the dip.
You buy the dip.
I'm all about some dip. Dude, some dip. Chips and dip sound good. Anyway, next, another big name, because a lot of people, myself included, were all aboard the train of CEH this year. I was pumped to see some progression here this year, and now all of a sudden, dude dealing with an ankle sprain, and I do not like ankle sprains. We've talked about this for multiple shows now. They just don't go away, Ethan. If it's anything high ankle sprain, I may go in the corner and cry.
Well, I got some good news and I got some bad news. Well, the good news is that it's not a high ankle sprain. The bad news is that it is a medial ankle sprain, which means it's on the inside of his foot, which is not the most common type of ankle sprain. Typically with a low ankle sprain, you're looking at the outside of the foot turns in and overstretches the outside of his foot. With a medial ankle sprain, the prognosis is a little bit worse. So the length of recovery time takes a little bit longer. It's a little harder to rehab. it's a little harder to protect with bracing and wrapping and taping. And so with a low grade medial ankle sprain, you're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks, which could push him into the start of the season if it's a low grade. And we don't know. This is the most recent injury in this video. And so there's still a lot of questions on how bad is this ankle sprain going to be. A grade 2 or even a grade 3 could push his recovery into the middle of the season. And so obviously we need to be keeping an eye on this one as the news comes out this weekend. But Darrell Williams is really the guy that you need to be paying attention to. He needs to be rostered in dynasty leagues if he's not already. And in redraft, you need to be bumping him up a little bit in your ADP, because if Clyde Edwards-Helaire does have a significant ankle injury, Darrell Williams seems to be the guy that's next in line. And not surprising, I guess, we've already talked about him a few times on the channel this year already.
Yeah. Now for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's sitting right now in the 3rd round. I mean, obviously we tell everybody push your drafts back as far as you possibly can. Draft as late as possible so you have the most up-to-date information. Are you still okay in the 3rd round, or is this enough to scare you away and make him have to go later, or what?
I think it really depends on who all's left at that point. I am a big CEH guy, and so if there aren't a whole lot of running backs left that I love, I'll still push the button in the 3rd. It is a risky move. I think in the 4th round, I like it a lot better. Even if this news is worse, then we're starting to talk about 5th, 6th, 7th round, because there is a chance, I guess, if this is severe enough, that he could miss multiple games with it. And we just know that in these types of situations, this is a similar ankle injury as to what Michael Thomas had last year. And we just saw that thing just lingers the whole year. I mean, it's just hard to get back from it. The Chiefs have a bye week in week 12, so it's not like he's even going to have, a full week of rest, to start the season early. So for me, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is definitely in that moderate risk category. He's a guy that I'm trying to get a discount on if I can, but if the price is too steep, I'm okay with just passing up on him and avoiding that risk.
You've burst my bubble, Ethan. I have no bubble.
I'm sorry.
But maybe some better news on the next guy, though. And maybe it's not as fantasy relevant, but it's Carson Wentz, who originally had a timetable of like 5 to 6 years. It's like 5 days to 6 years was like his original timetable. It was stupid. It was like 5 to 12 weeks, totally random. And a lot of people just started, dropping down Jonathan Taylor because they're up, no Carson Wentz. And then all of a sudden they had injuries on the offensive line, another timetable of 5 to 12 weeks with Quentin Nelson. And now all of a sudden, everybody's going to be ready for week 1. I don't understand.
Well, the big thing with this is he had a foot surgery to remove a bone fragment from an injury that was probably undiagnosed at some point in his career. Carson Wentz doesn't have the best reputation for staying healthy, so anytime he gets hurt, people are going to start fading him, expecting it to take way, way longer than what it will. But this did happen at the beginning of August, so it's very possible that he is ready by week 1. But at this point, he hasn't actually returned to full reps yet. And so while the surgery was pretty simple, they just go in, remove that bone fragment, sew it back up. The fact that he has this history makes people, assume the worst with Carson Wentz every time.
That's the whole thing, right? It's the name factor all of a sudden. Up here we go again, going all over again with Carson Wentz. But how about another high-profile wide receiver? Stephon Diggs is somebody who hasn't practiced in a while. And at first, when I was reading through the reports, I'm like, they're just not going to risk anything with him. But the longer this goes, should we be more and more nervous?
I think yes and no. I do think it's concerning. He hasn't practiced since August 9th. So we're going on, almost 2 full weeks.
Right.
The team has been pretty bullish that this isn't an issue that's going to keep him out of regular season games, that they're just being super cautious with him, which is things that you want to hear when we're talking about a guy of the caliber of Stephon Diggs. They actually do expect him back in practice sometime next week. So I'm not really worried for week 1. It's just worth knowing that he had this if something were to creep up again later in the season, that this was something that he was dealing with in the preseason.
Perfect. What about Mark Andrews? Now, that was kind of a scary sight the other day. Saw the ambulance roll up on the field. Not exactly what you want to see during the preseason for one of your top offensive players, especially on a team in Baltimore that's already so banged up. Mark Andrews, though, do we need to worry going into the season?
Yeah, scary situation here, just because we know that Andrews does have, type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime we see him cramping or having any type of issues, this ended up being just, severe cramping, which is a symptom of both the heat. The practice that he was at was very, very hot. More than likely, it was dehydration related. It was not diabetes related, but it is worth knowing that he has that. So anytime we see this type of situation, they're going to be extra cautious with him. They want to make sure that he's not going to have some type of blood sugar issue, which could cause, major damage to his internal organs. So he did leave practice in an ambulance, but he wasn't actually taken to the hospital. They were able to treat the dehydration in the ambulance with IV fluids. And more than likely, this is just one of those things where they're going to give him a bit of rest, let him get healed back up. But it was not, luckily, was not something major serious related to his diabetes, at least not directly related to that. It's more than likely a dehydration and cramping issue from the heat.
Well, good. That I guess you could say that is good news. What about his teammate though? Rashad Bateman was like flying up draft boards. I'm talking like this guy was on a steady increase. He looked like Dogecoin like 4 months ago. But it was, struck down quickly, right? This guy dealing with a core muscle surgery. To me, that sounds like super bad. Every time I hear that, I feel like they got to go in there like repair the interior body muscles. It just sounds bad. But like, how worried should we be about Rashad Bateman? Not so much maybe at the start of the season, because we understand there's some rehab, but like going on further into the season.
Well, you never want to see this with rookies, especially rookies that get injured in the preseason. They tend to struggle their rookie year just because they miss all this practice time. They miss all this time that they should have had to build, a relationship with their quarterback, to build trust in their quarterback. Lamar Jackson has his own questions as far as how will he do, not as a running quarterback for fantasy? Obviously, we love him, but can he actually get the ball to all these great receivers that they're giving him? But Rashad Bateman, a core muscle surgery, sometimes we call this sports hernia surgeries. Normal recovery is about 6 to 8 weeks. Coach Harbaugh actually came out and said that they expect him back in September, but this seems pretty aggressive just given the timeline and when he had the injury. I'm looking at probably week 3 at the earliest that we see Rashad Bateman. And I do expect this to prolong into about midway through the season in terms of his production. So if you're trying to draft Rashad Bateman as your wide receiver, 4 or 5, just know that you might not see any return on that investment until, well into the fantasy season.
Yep. And his ADP has already started to drop all the way down into the 14th round right now. So at that point of your draft, depending on your league situation, your bench size, all that kind of stuff, not a bad flyer to take at the bottom of your bench, but not somebody you're going to be reliant on anytime soon. One guy you may be reliant on, because you got to take him a heck of a lot earlier, is DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. Now, a lot of people have some high hopes for DJ Moore. I may not be as high as others, but I do agree that this offense is underrated in Carolina, and the likes of a DJ Moore could be heavily utilized as long as he's healthy and on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So DJ Moore is dealing with a back injury. He originally hurt it this Wednesday and then re-aggravated it on Thursday. More than likely, this is just a precautionary thing. It's probably a muscle or contusion or bruise issue. But anytime you hear back, you have to, raise some red flags, because back issues, they can become an issue long-term, especially if you need something like a surgery. It's unlikely that that's the case, though, with DJ Moore. I'm still okay with drafting him where he's going right now. I do think that, this is something that's worth knowing, that he has it, he's dealing with it, but it's not something that I expect to actually linger all the way into the season. It's more of just the nature of where the injury is the concern.
Perfect. What about his teammate, though? Robbie Anderson out there looking like a homeless dude watching Terrace Marshall take all the targets. The guy out there, I mean, there's some still photos out there. If I can find one, I'll throw it up on the screen. But, I mean, he's just sitting there watching Terrace Marshall, who is a whole nother story. Like, he's looking really good in camp. But Robbie Anderson, just another weapon here in Carolina that's giving Terrace Marshall that opportunity. Are we starting to worry about Robbie Anderson at all?
I don't think so. It's reported that he's got a low-grade hamstring strain. This is pretty common for when these guys come back, the first few weeks of the season, especially in the preseason. We're going to see a lot of hamstrings, groins. In fact, most of this video from here on out is going to be me telling the same thing. So just know that strains and sprains, low grade. This is expected in the preseason. It should be cleared up by week 1. It should not affect how you go about drafting these guys for redraft.
So the same thing basically goes for like the next guy on the list here is DAndre Swift, another guy who's being drafted fairly early, but he's just somebody who I'm a little bit more worried on anyway because I don't trust anything in Lions. If I have to worry about any injury concerns, it just adds to that concern.
Yeah, DAndre Swift is a little bit of a different case. So he does have a groin strain, and he has missed, large portions of the preseason with this groin strain. And if you remember last year, he actually missed a good chunk of the preseason with a hip flexor issue as well. So Swift actually did have a history coming into the league of nagging issues like these types. And so it is not good to see that this is continuing into his NFL career. It was a concern I had when he came out of college. When I went through and looked at his injury history in college, I noticed a trend of, he's never really missing a ton of games, but he's always dinged up with something. And what we find is eventually that is going to lead to something that's severe. So while I am not concerned for DAndre Swift, based on this current injury, I am concerned that there is a history of this becoming an issue, and I worry about how that could play out as his season progresses.
What about Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs? Another one of these speedster type of guys, really reliant on that speed, a lot of torque going into those muscles, and when they're strained, I can only imagine that greatens the chance of him, having another one of these lingering, hamstring type issues as well throughout the season.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill dealing with a hamstring strain as well. It is low grade, but the team has to be cautious. When you're dealing with a very high twitch athlete like Tyreek Hill, you do not want to put him at risk of, making this even worse. The team is obviously going to rely on him all season, so they're going to give him plenty of time in the preseason to get healthy. Biggest concern is just when he comes back and tries to go full speed, will he re-injure it? And so we know that with hamstring strains, most likely to re-injure it in the first 2 weeks after you return to full speed activities. So Tyreek Hill's full speed is a lot faster than normal humans. So we are concerned that the stress that he puts on his hamstrings is being much, much more than what an average NFL player even is.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think that I'm up there in that speed category, Ethan.
Yeah.
I'm close. No, I'm not.
Yeah, definitely. Just a burner for sure.
I mean, I've had one passing play or one receiving play in the past 25 years of my life, and I'm just going to say I took it 50 yards to the house, and my quarterback just laid it in for a perfect one-handed grab.
I've been told it was the best throw of the year that anyone's ever seen.
I cannot wait for the people of Headliner Nation to see our one-on-ones that we ran earlier here in Ohio.
Pretty elite.
It's next level. All right, anyway, back to some real elite talent. What about Justin Jefferson? Some scary moments for him here earlier in the offseason with the shoulder injury. People started to drop him down their draft boards, myself included, until we got more information. But now it seems like he should be good to go for start of the season. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's dealing with an AC joint sprain in practice. We're not really expecting him to miss any significant time with this. Everyone kind of went, held their breath, waited to see what happened because he did look like he was in a lot of pain. AC joint sprains are very painful. So luckily it was not a clavicle fracture. It wasn't anything, that would cost him games during the season, but I doubt we see him again in the preseason. Yeah,
that one was scary. At first glance, I thought for sure it was a collarbone. That's why I'm not a doctor, though. So everyone can rest assured. Kenny Golladay. Here's another guy who I'm coming into the season with reservations. Like, I just don't know if I want Kenny Golladay. And then here we go again, dealing with hamstring strains. He's not practicing really. To me, this is almost enough for me to cross him off my draft board unless he severely drops. But he's already a great value where you're getting him. I just don't even know if I want that headache at all this year.
This one is definitely probably one of the tougher ones because he did have a hamstring strain in early August, so we haven't seen him return to practice yet. They did give him a 2 to 3 week window. We're not quite at that yet. We're getting closer though. We want to see him practicing, by the beginning of the season because they said he would. And so if this continues to linger, Kenny Golladay has a history of hamstring issues in the past. So this is once again becoming an issue for him. If he isn't practicing, in the next 10 days, I'm going to be very concerned. It's something that, he hasn't got any practice. Again, while he is a veteran, he's on a new team.
Yeah.
So this preseason time is important for him to develop trust with his quarterback, with the offensive scheme in general, and he's not getting that. So I think Kenny Golladay could be setting himself up to be, a real disappointment for people in fantasy this year if he is not able to get some practice time in before week 1.
Yep, agreed. Now, there's a couple big names too that I just want to touch on here at the end. Not so much new injuries, but kind of updates to some big name guys that a lot of people are asking questions about, and I'll give you a chance to go through all these guys. But Odell Beckham Jr., Cortland Sutton, and Saquon Barkley. How are they heading into the season? Are we starting to get that warm fuzzy on the inside?
Yes and no. So all 3 guys coming off of ACL tears. So we know that we're looking for 12 months from the injury itself. COVID really messed up a lot of the surgery times for these guys. Saquon Barkley actually opted to let his MCL heal before he had surgery. So that complicates the timeline a little bit. With Barkley, he is starting to take practice reps, which is good. He is cutting. There is some debate on whether or not that, one leg is bigger than the other. We would expect some atrophy with an ACL tear, and how does that affect him? I will tell you guys that I do have a personal relationship with one of the guys who worked with Saquon Barkley this offseason, and he was very, very confident that Saquon will be healthy, and that the videos of him, one side being bigger than the other are being way overblown, that this is not an issue. So I've talked to a guy that treated Saquon Barkley. He is not concerned, so I am not concerned. I think they're going to ease him into the season. I don't expect a full-blown workload for Saquon Barkley, but we're starting to see that be baked into his ADP. He's starting to fall into the early second round in some leagues, sometimes a little bit even later than that. And so if they start him out slow, that is okay. We're okay with that, as long as he ramps up and actually, as he gets more confident with that leg, starts to get a bigger workload. Now, the other 2, OBJ is probably the one I'm the most concerned about. He has not played in a preseason game yet. It's very unlikely that he does, being a veteran coming off an ACL. But he just, from the reports I've read, it doesn't look like he's quite on the same timeline as some of these other guys. His ACL came a little bit later in the year. And so we are concerned that maybe they're going to, they're probably not going to shut him down completely. He's just not going to be at 100% for a good chunk of the beginning of the season. So that concerns me quite a bit. Cortland Sutton, on the other hand, he does think he's going to play in a preseason game. He's very confident. He doesn't know which one of the 2 that are remaining, but he is very confident that he will play in a preseason game, which is good. If he has that confidence, it means that he's confident that his rehab has gone really, really well, and that we can expect him, basically to start the season to be ready to play.
Yep, agreed. I mean, and it's nice to see, because Cortland Sutton's a great talent. I just don't want people to get over enamored with it, because the last time we saw him on the field, he was like the team's only target. So now they have a lot more weapons there in Denver. It could be a little bit different scenario, and that could be another reason why he wants to get back on the field, because he knows he's going to have to fight for volume in that offense. But it sucks to go through a list of names like this, especially some of these bigger names, but we have to continue to do this leading up to draft season. Now, what I always tell people, and if I'm wrong, Ethan, interrupt me, shut me up, give me the middle finger, whatever you want to do. At the time of your draft, if you have questions, you have doubts, we have no, further information on some of these guys, that's where I'll make my decision. If I'm worried about a player, if I'm on the clock and CEH is sitting there and we have no new news other than he's not going to play, he's not going to practice, and his timetable is TBD, that's probably when I make that decision to just move on. But I don't do that ahead of time. I want to have the most up-to-date information at the time of my draft. That's when I will make my decision. Do you agree with that, or am I an idiot?
Yeah, my approach for fantasy drafts especially is, if in doubt, peace out. So
I like that.
If you're in doubt that they're going to be healthy, don't draft that person, because you're just going to wish that you hadn't. And it's almost a guarantee. If you draft a guy that is hurt in the preseason, that thing will linger the rest of the year, and you're just going to be frustrated. There's plenty of productive, healthy players in the NFL that are not having any injury issues. Just draft those guys. And I'm not saying that they won't get hurt at some point in the year, but we know that they're not hurt right now. And so that is a strategy that you need to take into account when you're drafting for guys. I don't care that you're the biggest Chiefs fan in the world. if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not practicing and you go to draft him and then he misses half the year, you're going to be mad the whole year that you drafted him. So just avoid the headache. And if he comes back and is totally healthy, you're like, man, I'm so glad that Clyde Edwards-Helaire came back and was healthy, but at least I didn't have that risk on my fantasy team.
Yep, exactly. That's what it's all about. And I'm going to put some timestamps down below for some of these players if you want to go back and listen to a few of the takes on some of them when we get a little bit closer, so you know what it is to look for. But this is the type of information that just kind of keep in your back pocket. We appreciate the Doc coming on here and going back to being, the Grim Reaper. But this is what we got coming up here all season long, is to make sure that you have the most updated information. Leave a comment down below. If you have a question on one of these players, if you have a question about a player we didn't talk about, leave that comment down below. Myself, Ethan, will go through the comments. We'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can to make sure you have that information. But do us a favor, right? The season is right around the corner, and all we're asking for is for you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so we can keep you up to date all year long. We're getting close to 120. Can we hit 120 before, like next week? That would be amazing, because I'd love to be at 125 before the season starts, and only you can help us do that. But we greatly appreciate the support. Hit that like button, and for Dadak and myself, have a great rest of your day. Peace out.